All right, guys. So let me go over this opportunity real quick with you. Again, thank you so much for your last minute, very short turnaround effort. I was a little bit nervous about this one because I got this email literally 5 minutes before I posted it here in the syndicate, and the deadline was literally the next day this morning at 9 a.m. Eastern time. So that was 6 a.m. Pacific time. So we literally less than 24 hours, I think maybe like 12, 15 hours. I mean, this was such a tight deadline. Not common in my career, but it definitely can happen. And so part of the experience you guys get here in the syndicate is just getting real world opportunities like this. And don't be surprised if you get one of your library partners or somebody that you partner with to throw something like this at you. A lot of times this comes because you clean up the mess from a previous either library or composer. I didn't exactly know why this had such a tight deadline, but I think what I'm getting from the client that I talked to about this opportunity is that they've gone through a bunch of different styles of music and they haven't found anything they exactly want, but they are sort of pressed for whatever reason to get this thing done, and they need to start having this thing up and running by mid-November. This ad or this, I guess it's more of like kind of a corporate promo sales pitch thing they're going to be using. Okay, so we are coming in to hopefully save the day and provide some great options. So I was a little bit nervous, and that's why in the opportunity I said if you have something just laying around, that's why I said just unlimited, just post whatever you feel could work for this, because I didn't know how many of you would even have the time to crank out something new. Luckily, as you saw, it's 30-second demo, so that shouldn't have taken too long. But still, with that such a tight deadline, it's a really hard thing. But you guys completely blew me away. When I went to bed last night, I reviewed a lot of the tracks that came in, and then this morning when I woke up around 5, went through and listened to a lot more, and obviously reviewed everything that was posted up until exactly 6 a.m. And you guys completely blew me away. A lot of the tracks that did not obviously get onto the final 3 that I forwarded on, many different issues. Some of them were just the wrong style. I think some of you guys maybe just pulled something out of your hard drive that, it was either a little bit more in the EDM electronic side of things, or it was kind of more of a pop or a rock thing. So just the style itself wasn't quite moving, quite matching what we wanted. And as you can see here, the genre they really wanted was this sort of classical cinematic orchestral. It's almost not necessarily trailer-esque, but that's really they wanted to go. So some of you guys just had elements in your tracks and submissions that just didn't feel like it was right for this. This was a tricky one. Obviously, as you guys could tell from the notes and the brief that we got here, that between these 3 reference tracks that they gave us, they were kind of all over the place. Each one of these actually was very different, very unique. But throughout all of this, I think the Journey of Light, this track that they had here, for me, just as I was going and reviewing this brief that I was given, that was the one essentially that I think they were really going for. And I think, they had this Nine Inch Nails thing, which obviously this was, and they put here, definitely don't want this track to be this dark, meaning they were just kind of giving you an idea of maybe some, what do you call it, like industrial kind of gritty elements that they might have wanted to add into the track, but they don't want it to be a dark, brooding, very intense sort of a track in that manner. So this is kind of one of those things where when you work with clients, they'll give you these 3 reference tracks, and you might not know, or which one do I go in, which direction do I go in. So what I usually do, if I see a lot of differences between these, like this Photograph one was much more just classical piano with some small little orchestral elements around it, but this one was much more of sort of that epic cinematic feel. And Nine Inch Nails, this was obviously very industrial and very dark, so they're like all over the place. Well, what I usually do is I kind of like try to read between the lines, and especially if they've written something with the brief, and I try to really listen to and understand what they're really saying with their brief. And so that's what I want to do this video for, so I can kind of break down how I interpreted this brief, so you guys can understand how to interpret these things moving forward. And then now at the end of this, I will go through the 3 tracks that I decided to pass on to them. For those 3 that did get accepted, just hang tight. I'll let you know if there's any notes, if one of your tracks get accepted. There's obviously no guarantees that we get it accepted, but if one of yours does, that's when I will go out and request for you to create the full 2 to 3 minute long version of your track, okay? So let's go into the notes that they gave us. So the structure, classical, non-rhythmic, that builds energy to a climax and then trails off resolve. So usually this is kind of how I'm seeing this is a sort of a growing, evolving. It could be a pad if you have a little bit of a sort of a cinematic feel to the pad, but it could also be strings. So they're basically non-rhythmic, meaning it doesn't necessarily have to have a pulse or a rhythm that goes with like a piano line or something like that in the very beginning. So something that just kind of sets the mood in a sort of I don't know, a free form way, I guess, in the very beginning of the track. And then it can build to a climax and then trails off and resolve. So I know these are demos, so I didn't expect necessarily everything involved with these were going to be included in your guys' demos. But the more that you were able to put some of these into your demo, the more that I could really sell it to the client to say, look at what you could really get once we extend this to a 2 to 3 minute long track. They can kind of hear for themselves what they could really get there. Tone, beautiful, melodic, that is emotionally engaging, dramatic, okay? So beautiful, melodic, right? That's not dark, that's not brooding, that's not too sort of like a scary sounding, which is kind of more where that Nine Inch Nails thing was, right? And some of you guys did post some tracks that were just a little bit too in that dark area and not really giving me something beautiful or melodic, right? So obviously these are some keywords you guys need to be listening to and paying attention to for the briefs that you guys get. Texture, simple, empty at times, so fairly empty, fairly minimal. That's another way to interpret that. But then filling up with mechanical, industrial, darker elements to highlight the images. This also juxtaposes the beauty shots. So this is where that sort of industrial side of things can really kind of come in to do that. And I know some of the tracks that I did accept, some of you guys didn't have necessarily so much of that going on, but obviously if they love the music of what you're doing, that might be something we have to actually help add into your full mix when you get to the 2 to 3 minute long version. Obviously, the genre, classical, cinematic, instruments, they told you right here what they want. Piano, violin, cello, ambient, industrial tones, but open to other instruments as well. Overall, we want it to be on the darker cinematic side, but still beautiful and edgy without being too somber. Okay, so beautiful. They've used that word twice here, actually. So beautiful. That's usually the first thing that I would have keyed into if I were submitting my music for this kind of opportunities. They want the music, as you listen to it, to just have beauty, to have this openness, to have this kind of not too dark, but not too, as opposed to, let's say, something that's just completely optimistic, completely like the future is bright and everything's wonderful, or even on the kind of cheesy, happy side. That's not where they wanted to go. So it's kind of got a serious feel to it, right? But it's got this beauty in the music. So again, what does beauty mean in music? This is, of course, all subjective terms, and you have to do your best to just sort of interpret what they're going for there. And especially with such a tight turnaround, you guys did a great job with trying to do that. So let me go ahead and go into the 3 tracks that I forwarded on, and I'll kind of break them down as to why I felt that they were really strong and some of the stronger ones that I got, so that those of you that didn't get onto the final 3 can maybe A/B compare your track to what they did there, and you can kind of maybe see where you didn't quite hit the mark. So Estevan, you were the first one here. Let's take a listen to your track. It was a mythic discovery. So a beautiful, simple piece of music. You had the nice fade in there that they were requesting. Usually you guys know that I say don't ever start with fade ins unless your client asks for the fade in. So obviously this would be the exception to that rule. So beautifully crafted. You really do bring that sort of beauty to the track. You have the industrial elements, those really cool industrial, like the contro juxtaposition between this kind of beautiful classical composition with sort of some industrial sounds that are coming along with it. So you definitely nailed that. The one note I would have for you is this is a little bit on the dark side in terms of like sad. It just sounds a little more sad than it feels more, I guess, in a sort of a beautiful discovery mode, which is kind of like where I think they really wanted to go. So that would be just the one note I would have for you. But I thought that it was so strong just as a whole that I wanted to definitely pass your track on. So great sounding instruments, your strings, your piano, everything sounds very live, very relevant for this. Some of you guys put together some orchestral elements, and your strings, I could really tell that they were just programmed on a keyboard because like the attack and decay would be really too short or I just kind of hear this real, this kind of drop off between your string, your chords with your strings, and then when it would come back in, I just really heard this kind of artificial start to the string. So, fine tuning the automation and the articulations with your string plugins is something to really pay attention to. But obviously, Estevan, you have some great sounds that you're working with here. Really well crafted, man. You definitely nailed it there. So next up, we had, this was Asher's track, Mythic Discovery. Sorry, your track was not Mythic Discovery, Estevan. Yours was Subtle Revelation. Sorry, got that wrong. Asher, yours was the next one here, Mythic Discovery. Here's check a listen. Now, this one definitely needed a little bit of work, but I wanted to include it mostly because of the second half here. I think what you captured here is the essence of this beautiful, motivating, uplifting, but with this seriousness, this kind of beauty side to it. So I think this was really the shining moment of your track. Obviously, we didn't start with the arrhythmic lead-in or the fade-in, which is what we really needed for this opportunity. However, of course, I know that if we need to extend your track, if they just like what you're doing here with the second part, then we can definitely, obviously, include that for that. Secondly, for a 30-second demo, we shouldn't be having really these kind of cutouts like this. This is another thing that I wouldn't have advised you to do in the future. You only got 30 seconds to show off the music, so there's really no need for any sort of a long fade out and, sort of a pause before we go into the chorus. What I would have rather seen you do is start with a fade in, bring this up, and then just grow us into this big epic part. We have these nice, growing, I think it's the horn notes that you have underneath there. It's very simple, but it definitely is right in line with what we need to do here. The track as a whole is a little bit on the quiet side, so I definitely would encourage you to get a little bit more aggressive on your mastering, or maybe just turning up the tracks in your session. I think this needs to be a little bit louder. It certainly was a little bit quieter compared to the other ones, but based on all the submissions that I got, this one was, I feel like, nailing the sort of classical side of this really well, and really getting into that kind of beauty zone, whatever that might be. I think you really got that there. So definitely a little bit of work, though. I think this one's needed. So, but great work, man. I'm glad that you put this together. And then last but not least, Art, definitely one of the strongest submissions I got. I'll just play it. You guys will probably hear for yourselves why this one made it on. So, I mean, you basically just nailed it on all cylinders here. I mean, it's just a great sounding track. I think you basically combined, in the original opportunity, there were two reference tracks. One obviously had the more cinematic feel, but then this photograph track actually had a really kind of this fluttering piano going through it. So, as a very wise move by you, you basically combined the best of both. You have this very cinematic, dramatic piece that is very beautiful. I think two things I would definitely say here, though. We obviously didn't have the sort of fading in, arrhythmic start to it. You had a little bit of a fade, but I think if you kind of had a little bit more of a statement with like a pad or maybe some strings or something like that didn't have necessarily the movement to it, that would have been a good thing to showcase that you could do that. But obviously, if your track gets accepted, we'll make sure you do that for your full 2 to 3 minute track. And then you basically just build this just perfectly in terms of we don't ever feel like we're getting stuck in a loop. It really feels like it's developing over and over again. The other point, I forgot, there was one more, not having this. I just lost my point of view or my train of thought. There was one other thing I was going to, what was it? Oh, the industrial elements. Sorry, forgive me. The industrial elements. I didn't hear too much of it. I mean, you have some of these lower hits, these booms that go through the track, but the industrial side of it, probably we could enhance that just a little bit more to have that juxtaposition between a beautiful, dramatic piece with some sort of industrial sounds that you could kind of bring on board, some metallic sounds, something like that, right? So probably a little bit of feedback I would give you for that one, but I would say this is probably the closest that I heard in terms of what they were looking for, and considering how short of a turnaround this was, this is just, you knocked it out of the park, man. You just did a really great job with that. So really well done. Obviously your strings, everything sounds really great. Great samples that you're working with there. So that was it, guys. I will definitely keep you all updated, of course, on the opportunity, and I'll let you know if there's any notes or feedback that I can help give to those three of you to maybe help, improve the odds of them getting accepted. We'll see. It kind of depends. Every single opportunity, sometimes they just go, cool, we like this, extend it, or they'll say, we like this one, but can you change this and this, and then we'll decide if we want to accept that for the full opportunity. So I will certainly let you guys know of any updates to this. So again, thank you all for your hustle, for really coming through for me and coming through for us as a group here. It really does show and gives me even more confidence that you guys really can nail these things, even with these short, tight little turnarounds. And I hope that those of you that obviously didn't get accepted had fun with this, learned something, and obviously as this review video hopefully will reveal a little bit of my insight and my perspective for these opportunities, and to really just do your best when you have these really short turnarounds, is try to interpret these opportunities as best as you possibly can, and really start to paying attention to the language that you really get for these opportunities. So again, thank you, and I'll keep you all posted on how this one goes.